The we have a quorum and we'll start the meeting with introductions, and we'll start there.
With Gutman, I represent the League of Women Voters.
Tom Banning, District 3.
Jerry Glazer, North Bay chapter of the Electric Auto Association.
Mark Hale, Building Industry Association.
Brian Lang, District 4.
Eris Weaver, Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition.
Tom Conlon, Sonoma County Conservation Coalition.
Mark Soilen, District 2.
Jake McKenzie, Sonoma County Transportation and Land Use Coalition.
In the back, please.
Adam Garcia, SCTA, RCPA.
Sean Dawes, SCTA, RCPA.
Fred Adair, SCTA, RCPA. Cody Miller, Sonoma County Area EV. Rob Condon, SCTA, RCPA. And Drew Nichols, SCTA, RCPA.
And on the Zoom screen, we have,
Read the names on the Zoom screen.
please.
Margot Kanyas, SCTA, RCPA.
And then as well, we have Dan Bell, Gina Erickson, Linda Shopton, Carol Taylor, Jan Schiller, Bjorn Grippenberg from the city of Petaluma. And yeah, that's all on Zoom.
Thank you. And I am Musa Abbasi, representing the Santa Rosa Chamber of Commerce. Public comments. Do we have any public comments? I see none. The minutes, approval of the last meeting, the October 28th meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I so move.
Second,
Second.
discussion? I have a discussion, in fact. On page 1 of the minutes, there is something does not make sense to me in the public comments, the second paragraph. You know, like the vote was unanimous, David Rabbit and Gerard, blah, blah, blah. I don't think this belongs to our minutes, you know. Is it?
It wasn't reported out on the SCTA board of directors meetings on it. It was on the item regarding the funding that the agency was talking about. And in that, the SCTA board of directors, Director Gerard Giudice and David Rabbit voted against that motion.
Oh, okay. I got confused because I thought you are talking about our meeting, you know.
Yeah, it's video on, so that's referring to another meeting, not this specific.
Okay.
The SCTA board of directors meeting.
Okay. Any other comments?
I might just offer an edit to avoid that confusion for anyone else reading the minutes. It says here, the board of directors agreed with the opinion. And that's the SCTA Board of Directors. And I would just add the first clause of the second paragraph. The vote was not unanimous. The vote of the Golden Gate the MTC. There's no reference in here to the MTC meeting. So just specify the vote of the MTC board was not unanimous.
It wasn't the MTC board, though. It was the SCTA.
I'm sorry, you're right. You're right. I'm thinking of the other previous meeting. So
You could say the vote at the SCTA board if.
that would just clarify that these two members who serve on the other district's board. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? So we have an amended, motion, let us vote. Who is in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? I see none. Minutes approved as amended, We have the City of Petaluma Measure M presentation, and this, I believe, will be online.
That's correct, Mr. Vice Chair. Today we have Bjorn Grippenberg, who is from the city of Petaluma. He is going to provide you with a project presentation on the funds that city of Petaluma is using for the project funding of sorry.
Measure M.
Measure M, but of the project, which is the Access Across 101. As you are all likely aware, Access Across 101 was meant to provide feasibility study funding for various jurisdictions along the 101 corridor. We, at some point, amended the project to provide for $250,000 per jurisdiction, and then the first 4 jurisdictions to come forward to access those funds would get $250,000. City of Petaluma is the last of those 4 jurisdictions. The others have been Santa Rosa, Windsor, and Roanoke Park. So with that, I would hand it over to Bjorn.
All right. Thank you very much. Good evening to you all. Just a quick check to make sure you can hear me okay. Thumbs up. All right, great. Well, thank you very much for having me this evening virtually, and thank you to all for your service to our county by serving on this Citizens Advisory Committee. I realize that's sometimes a bit of a thankless task to spend your evenings this way. So happy to share with you some more information about our Access Across 101 study this evening, as well as a project update about some of our efforts on Lynch Creek Trail, which are funded with Go Sonoma. And just to kick things off, a little bit of background that I think is helpful to understanding any transportation matters within the city of Petaluma, and something that's certainly relevant to both of these projects that I'll be speaking about tonight, are the barriers that we have in Petaluma to crosstown mobility. As you all know, we are a city where many people refer to East Petaluma and West Petaluma, and the reason for that is that we have 3 very dividing features in our city: US 101, the Petaluma River, and the SMART tracks, each of which allow for limited crossing opportunities and create some real challenges when we are trying to, for anyone trying to move around in Petaluma, as I'm sure many of you have experienced. So this little schematic map here shows those 3 barriers, as well as the existing crossings of each, and so you can see where those challenges come from. And as a result, our city council in recent years has really placed an emphasis on not only trying to improve our existing crosstown connectors for all modes of travel, but also identify opportunities to create new crosstown connectors. Some additional background: we are a relatively small city, and most trips are made by car. However, we know as we implement complete streets projects and improve our bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, there is a major opportunity in Petaluma to shift lots of trips from car to walking and biking. The average trip length made within our city limits is under 3 miles, which is a trip that you can bike in 15 minutes or less. And a third of trips originating in Petaluma are under 2 miles, which is equivalent to a 10-minute bike ride or less. Transportation is also, as it is in all Sonoma County cities, the leading source of our greenhouse gas emissions at about 2/3. And our city council has adopted a goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2030. So obviously transportation really plays a key role in that. And so with that, jumping into our Access Across 101 study. And in this study, we are looking at 4 locations: the Corona Road overcrossing, Rainier Avenue undercrossing, which is not currently utilized, the Lynch Creek Trail crossing of North McDowell Boulevard, which is very close to Highway 101 and was identified as a major barrier for that facility, and then the Mackenzie Avenue or Kenilworth pedestrian overcrossing down behind the Target shopping center. And so for each of these locations, our consultant, Stephen Grover and Associates, has been asked to study the opportunities and constraints at each location and identify potential alternatives to improving bicycle and pedestrian connectivity and accessibility, then engage the public on some of these alternatives, get people's opinions and preferences among those alternatives, and then develop, take a final kind of recommended concept for each and develop conceptual plans and cost estimates so that we understand what it'll take to make those improvements in the coming years. So I'll go through each of these locations one by one and try to give a quick snapshot of what some of the opportunities and constraints are and what we're currently looking at. Starting at the north end with the Corona Road overcrossing. So this runs between Petaluma Boulevard North and North McDowell Boulevard. And it's an area that is not heavily developed currently, but with the new Petaluma North Smart Station starting operations very shortly here in the next couple of months, obviously there will be more demand for people traveling in this area. So this is what it looks like on the Corona Road overcrossing currently. It does not have sidewalks or bike lanes, as you can see, very narrow shoulders. You have what appears to be, I'll show my cursor there, these look like sidewalks, but as you can see, they end at either end of the structure. So there's no tie-in to Petaluma Boulevard North or North McDowell Boulevard. And so the alternatives studied here include creating a new bicycle and pedestrian freeway crossing on either side of the bridge, looking at some nearby drainage culverts to see if an undercrossing is feasible, or just seeing what modifications we could potentially make to the existing structure, which would be most cost effective. And so after looking through each of those options, we really have honed in on what we think is a really promising option to construct a very slight extension to the current structure, and which would allow for sufficient width to build both a protected multi-use pathway for people walking and biking on the eastbound side, and then a westbound protected bike lane on the westbound side. So that's from all of the alternatives we've looked at, not only the most cost-effective, but also the most efficient use of this potential footprint. And we do have an exciting opportunity to potentially coordinate with Caltrans. They'll be doing a railing replacement project on the Corona Road overcrossing in 2031, and very similar to the railing replacement projects that that were recently constructed on the Todd Road and Baker Avenue overcrossings in Santa Rosa. So hopefully, we are far enough in advance of their Corona Road railing replacement project, and there can be some coordination so we can achieve some cost savings there and collaborate with Caltrans. Moving next to the Rainier Avenue undercrossing. And so this is located, it's essentially an extension to Rainier Avenue. It dead ends just west of North McDowell Boulevard. And we're looking at an opportunity to tie it into the future planned Petaluma River Trail through this area, as well as tying it in with the existing SMART Trail. So this is an opportunity as part of the Marin-Sonoma Narrows freeway widening project. This undercrossing shown on the top there was just completed a few years back. So there's a great opportunity now to put some sort of facility, pathway or roadway underneath the freeway. Although there is right-of-way needed to make that connection beyond the freeway. And as you can see on the bottom there's a really exciting opportunity to build a pathway undercrossing also underneath the SMART tracks that ties into the SMART Trail, which is a really a rare and exciting opportunity. Obviously, it's very challenging to get at-grade rail crossings approved. We have met with SMART staff, and they're similarly very excited about the potential for this project to improve connectivity to their trail. And so here are a couple of kind of schematic designs showing what that could look like, building that pathway along the north bank of the river that then travels underneath the SMART tracks and then links up nicely with the existing SMART trail. That's the section that runs from Payran Street to South Point Boulevard. And then moving to the Lynch Creek Trail, which is our primary east-west crosstown connector for people walking and biking. It's a 2.5-mile trail that runs from downtown Petaluma all the way to our eastern urban growth boundary. And at this location, we, initially we're looking at some of the barriers around the US 101 area, and actually felt that the existing freeway undercrossing is pretty well designed. There isn't much of an opportunity for improvement. It's already lit 24/7. We have actually engaged our community, and many people shared with us that they feel that the undercrossing feels safe, and so we decided actually to refocus our efforts on the crossing of North McDowell Boulevard over near Lucchese Park and the Petaluma Community Center, which, based on the feedback we got, is a much more significant barrier to using the trail. And so you can see why that is here. So Lynch Creek Trail, the trail actually switches sides of the creek as it crosses North McDowell Boulevard. So it goes from the north bank to the south bank. This dashed red line is the desire line. That's the way people want to go. However, with the current conditions, you're forced to use a narrow sidewalk, go up to Lynch Creek Way, and cross with the signal. And it's not a very lengthy detour, but for one thing, that sidewalk is not built to multi-use pathway width, and this is obviously a very busy trail for people, both for people walking, biking, riding scooters, etc. And also just standing out there and observing it, we see lots of people who, because they don't want to make that detour, will wait for gaps in the traffic and kind of dart across. So it's clearly, there's clearly a need there. And the alternatives studied here were just a quick look at what it would take to build an overcrossing or an undercrossing, but all along we've been very confident that an at-grade crossing really is the preferred design here, and also obviously the most cost-effective. So we've looked at a few different options that involve various forms of signalization. One of the challenges, obviously, is that you have an existing traffic signal up here at Lynch Creek Way. So of the options that we have looked at so far, this seems to be the preference, which would be to widen the sidewalk to multi-use pathway width on the west side of North McDowell Boulevard, and then install a new signalized intersection here, which would also serve a large senior apartment complex here, and the Petaluma Community Center, which this is the community center driveway here. And it obviously appears to be a pretty straightforward project, and of the 4 locations we're looking at, this is definitely the most feasible as a near-term project. And then moving lastly to the Mackenzie Avenue overcrossing. So this is located pretty close to just south of the East Washington Street freeway overcrossing. You can see the Target Shopping Center here, Fairgrounds over here, the Petaluma Raceway. And this is actually a pretty well-used facility, despite the fact that it is not very accessible. So this was built by Caltrans in 1971, before anyone was thinking about accessible design and accessible slopes. So as you can see, from this image, it's very steep, and it far exceeds those slope requirements. So it's especially challenging for people to navigate, if they're using wheeled devices, and of course, if they have mobility impairments. And so the alternatives that we've looked at here involve included replacing the structure within its current footprint. What this photo doesn't illustrate very well, but let me back up actually. I guess you can't really see well. So there are two homes right on either side of the structure on the east side of the freeway. So this space I'm showing here is actually extremely constrained. There's basically a house right on either side of this photo. So there's not much room to really expand. So we've looked at the existing footprint to see if there's any way we could get accessible slopes in using the existing footprint. We've also looked at what it would take to, what an overcrossing would look like if we were to acquire one of those properties on either side and expand the footprint. And then we've also looked at potentially installing an elevator and staircase to meet accessibility requirements on this side of the freeway. And I should note that back in 2010, Caltrans actually had designed an accessible replacement of this structure with the maximum allowable slope of 8.3%. Using the existing footprint. And they developed this through the Marin Sonoma Narrows project, but it was never implemented. And as you can see here, essentially what it involves is doubling up on the switchbacks. So, our consultant and we agree, everyone really has felt that this would not be a very user-friendly design. You'd have these extremely low ceilings as you're going up the ramps, and it would feel potentially unsafe, just not terribly inviting, and sort of I think you'd probably feel a little claustrophobic in there. So we're not terribly excited about that design, and that's why we're looking at other options. So really with each of those other options, they involve various challenges. Obviously, if we expand the footprint, we're looking at right of property acquisition, which is, complicated for many reasons. And then, with the elevator option, there are some serious concerns about maintaining that elevator. So we're still kind of working through this and each of those alternatives and figuring out what direction we want to go, if any. We have agreed, and acknowledged that we do want to do everything we can do in the meantime to make this structure as inviting and accessible as possible. So we've actually already done quite a bit of work. There used to be these awful gates on the structure at both ends and on the overcrossing itself that our public works crews have actually removed. We are in the process of pretty much as soon as we get a good weather window, our concrete contractor is going to go out and install a bulb out. You can see it here. That will allow at least people using wheeled devices to not have to go up over the 6-inch curb that waits for them at the bottom of the overcrossing. We've talked internally about the potential of turning this space into a pocket park and some other fencing modifications just to open it up and make it a little bit more inviting, kind of cleaning it up a little bit. So we're still, there's still, I think, a lot of analysis needed at this location before determining what long-term improvements we want to make, if any. There's also been some interest in potentially pursuing, rather than spending a bunch of money to replace this structure, which is obviously, that would be a very expensive project. Maybe putting that into actually just constructing a completely new structure elsewhere. So East Washington Street has kind of risen to the top of the list as a location where many people would like to see a much safer freeway crossing that doesn't involve exposure to the 101 on and off ramps. So more to come on that one. As far as the study is concerned, our next steps are to hone in on those recommended alternatives for each location, develop cost estimates, and implementation strategies, especially since each of these involves Caltrans in some capacity. We anticipate completing the study by mid-2025, and at the end of this, we will have projects. We will know enough about these projects to submit them for consideration in the city's 5-year capital improvement plan, which is adopted by our city council annually. And obviously they'll have a lot more information about each of these to consider as they're weighing these projects against other city priorities. And then moving to our Lynch Creek Trail Improvements project. So I mentioned a little bit of information about Lynch Creek Trail just a second ago. This, like I said, is our primary east-west connection for people walking, biking, rolling, about 2.5 miles from downtown to our eastern edge. And so what we've been doing over the past several years is making incremental progress, replacing, rehabilitating pavement on sections where the pavement has been degraded. And also we've been, believe it or not, we still have some unpaved sections. So we've been chipping away at trying to pave the full length of the trail. And this project is funded with just over $1.6 million in Go Sonoma funds. This map, far too detailed for you to, I think, to kind of decipher in real time, but what this shows is just the incremental progress we've made over the years, the blue sections being areas that we have rehabilitated or are rehabilitating coming up in 2025. Red sections being those that have been recently paved, or in the case of this dashed section, one that we'll be paving next year in 2025. That's our final unpaved section between Peyran Street and Edith Street. And this is just a glimpse at what that section looks like today. So this is access from Peyran Street. With this project, we will be upgrading this access point to be ADA compliant, and obviously it'll be paved. And then looking south from Peyran Street to Edith Street along the final unpaved section, obviously we'll be making improvements here, and those improvements will come in handy, especially during the wet months. It's pretty wet and muddy right now underneath the crossing, and so it could be a little slippery for folks if they're biking underneath. And our next steps there are just to finalize the design and get that out to bid for construction in 2025. And that is everything for me. So happy to take questions. Thanks.
Sorry, I was late, guys. So if I talk funny, because I'm numb. So Rick Lutman?
Yeah, thank you. I have two questions. I'll ask the simpler one first. What is the purpose of the existing undercrossing at Rainier? All I saw in your pictures were weeds and a meandering dirt track. Why is it there?
Yeah, so that was done. Some of you may know that for decades there have been plans to complete a Rainier Avenue construction from the current terminus just west of North McDowell Boulevard all the way over to Petaluma Boulevard North. So it would go underneath the freeway, and then it would actually elevate and go over the SMART tracks and Petaluma River, and then connect to Petaluma Boulevard North. That section, that project has actually been environmentally cleared. There was a lot of work on it. And so as Caltrans was working on the Marin Sonoma Narrows project and doing freeway work in that area, that was an opportunity for the city to actually contribute some money to Caltrans to construct the undercrossing, obviously save a lot of money compared to what it would take to do it without the freeway widening project, and just give the city that future opportunity, if desired, to build a roadway under there.
I see. Thank you. The other comment I have is about the Corona Road plan. So you have bike paths on both sides, but a pedestrian path on only one. And it seems to me that's going to cause some problems for pedestrians who will have to cross the road to get to the pedestrian path. Is it a matter of just that you couldn't afford to build it a little wider on one side so you could have a pedestrian path on both sides?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, we we're really looking at the existing connectivity in the area, and the reality is that you don't have currently, you know, there are no sidewalks on either side of the freeway, on either side of Corona Road or on either approach. So there are no sidewalks from North McDowell Boulevard or from Petaluma Boulevard North. We did look at kind of the future desire lines, I'll say, basically where we anticipate people would want to walk. And we really felt that there would be a stronger pull for people to walk on the side where we are showing the multi-use pathway, because that's the side that the SMART train or the Petaluma North station will be on. And also because there is, if you look a little bit closer to North McDowell Boulevard, you can see kind of the potential for a future sidewalk on that side of the roadway to continue that connection. Whereas it's really challenging on the other side of Corona Road, as you go towards North McDowell Boulevard, you actually have a pretty significant drainage ditch that really constrains that side of the street and would make it very difficult to build a sidewalk there. We initially were actually only looking at a multi-use pathway on one side to serve bidirectional bicycle traffic and bidirectional pedestrian traffic. And when we took that to an early community workshop, we got some feedback from folks that you know, they would really like to see a directional bike lane on the opposite side of the shared use pathway. The reason being that for people biking, those transitions can be challenging at either end. So when you're at those signalized intersections at either end, you know, to go cross over kind of in a contraflow against the direction of traffic at the signals might be, you know, some people just said, I'm not going to do that. So, you know, we only needed a couple of extra feet to accommodate that, and we felt that it would provide a good connection. It would really enhance the connectivity for people biking over the freeway there.
So are you thinking then of putting in a sidewalk all along Corona Road between these two major streets, and it would just be on the south side?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it would basically we would look at making a shared use pathway similar to what was shown in that on the freeway overcrossing along both of the approaches from both Petaluma Boulevard North and North McDowell Boulevard.
Mm-hmm. Great. There is one other question I thought of. Who owns these bridges? Is it the city of Petaluma or Caltrans?
Caltrans owns each of the bridges, and we have varying degrees of maintenance responsibilities depending on the bridge. But anything we do within Caltrans right of way ultimately requires their cooperation, their permission, I'll say.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Joy remotely has a question. Jan? Sorry. That's really small font. Jan?
Hi. I'm Jan Schiller, and I'm representing the AFN Committee, Accessible and Fundamental Needs Committee of Sonoma County, and also I'm a client representative for in-home support services. And I would like to say thank you so much for all the wonderful improvements you've made for people with disabilities and what you're planning to do. It's really going to make a difference for the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the kind words.
Bjorn, I had one quick question. John Bly, I came in late. I'm sorry about that. But on the Rainier Avenue undercrossing, remember when they were talking about that, there was a lot of talk about it getting flooded out. And I'm just wondering, how's it look after a record rainfall? Is it flooded out or is it manageable?
You know, I haven't been over there since this last storm to give a.
Well, I mean,
But
or a regular.
yeah, so I do know that area is identified in the floodplain. I'm not a hydrologist, so I don't, and it's not my area of expertise. But I do know that that it has been a discussion point when, when people, when our elected officials and city leadership have discussed sort of the development potential of that area, and that project, obviously the Rainier Avenue extension, that the floodplain has been and will continue to be a key consideration. It is obviously a very controversial project. It is not currently, it being the Rainier Avenue extension, is not currently in our 5-year capital improvement plan. So the direction we've received has been to focus our efforts instead on a new movable bridge at Caulfield Lane across Petaluma River. Basically, those are our two major crosstown connector projects that we can use traffic mitigation impact fees on. And so the direction we've received from council in recent years has been to prioritize the Caulfield Bridge over the Rainier Avenue extension.
Thanks, Bjorn. Tom?
Yeah, Bjorn, I also want to underscore, appreciate the accessibility enhancements and the bike and ped improvements you've just outlined. On Corona Road, a good discussion about the pros and cons of the cantilever and having only one side be a fully operational multi-use path. I'm curious, for folks on the north side of Corona, on either side of the bridge, what are their options for crossing to the south side? Because I think as you see that area develop, you're going to need a lot more of that kind of activity. So if you could just give us a few words about that, and another question too.
Yeah, so whenever you have that condition where you might have a directional bike facility that then needs to make that diagonal kind of contraflow crossing, ideally you do that at a signalized intersection. So it would require modifications to the Corona and the intersection of Corona Road and North McDowell Boulevard that would facilitate that diagonal intersection crossing so people could enter the shared use pathway and go contraflow.
Great, and that's the kind of thing that could be co-funded by fees by development parties, right?
It would really, require the funding plan would need to be developed once we actually have a project. And so, yes, I would imagine that there would be a portion of that could be eligible for traffic impact fees, but we have a lot of other sources we obviously look to fund.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah.
On the Mackenzie, I appreciate you thinking through and not just throwing money at that when it really probably won't improve the functionality very much. You did say that there is a lot of use of it currently, even though it's at 15% grade. The only things I can think of to improve it might be like zip line or trebuchet, and those aren't really feasible. But
Climbing wall.
well, I'm just wondering, because I'm getting older, it's getting harder to move around. I'm just thinking, are there some passive technologies, not a full-blown elevator, but mechanical technologies where it would be like a slide assist that wouldn't be terribly maintenance, likely to fail? Just trying to think through, are there mechanical solutions to that to assist on the steep rise?
I've seen something similar to like a cable car kind of technology that that help people get up steep hills on bikes, where you kind of I think I saw an example from somewhere in Europe where basically like put your bike on it and kind of step on it, and it'll give you a really slow push up. That being said, I'm not sure about the feasibility of that here or even how expensive that technology is. But I do appreciate the creativity.
Yeah, you come to us for ideas, so that's fine.
Bjorn, well, thank you very much. Great work that you guys are doing. I appreciate all the information you gave us today. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you all.
I had a question in the chat box.
What's that?
There's a question.
Oh, go ahead.
And I put a question in the chat box.
I
Um,
understand want to add more bike trails, however, people can't pick up groceries or children on bikes. Question mark?
Sean, is that, or Chair, is that something you want me to address? I'm happy to.
I'm not sure. What's the question in there? That they, on bikes, you can't pick up groceries?
I mean, I would disagree. I have a cargo bike that I can carry 2 children on plus groceries in bags or in my front rack. But I think I know where the question is coming from. And, what I would say is that we're really, with these projects, we're not trying to make it harder for anyone to get around by any mode, whether it's any other mode, whether it's walking or driving. Really, to the contrary, we're hoping that if we can make biking as safe and accessible as possible, that those who are inclined to and can choose to bike will do so. And ultimately what that does is that frees up space for people who are driving. That frees up room at the traffic light, that frees up parking spaces. If instead of, having 90% of people in Petaluma driving their 3-mile trips, we have a handful of those people biking, that makes a difference.
Yes, but
Does
not,
that answer your question?
yes, but not everyone can afford to buy a cargo bike.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Bjorn.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too. Shauna, you are up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. The next item before you is the draft Measure M annual report. You all have been through this at least once, I think. So let me just refresh your memory real quick on the process. What we do is draft a annual report and bring it to you in text format, not all pretty with all the photos and everything, but it gives you the opportunity to review the content so that if you have questions and or concerns about what is contained within the draft, then we have the opportunity to possibly hold another meeting to resolve any significant issues, should they be identified, in December before we bring you what we call the final draft, where that's been to the graphic artist and been through a number of iterations through review process in amongst staff and so forth. And it has been to committees. So this is your opportunity to provide us comment and for us to determine if a December meeting is necessary or if we can just move forward with your comments received today and then bring you back a final draft in January.
Great. Is anybody, yeah, Tom?
Thank you. So I took a quick look and something that's been occurring, we've talked about this in past reports, the rehabilitation spending, forget this LSR program that.
That's right.
And the amount of granular detail we get, particularly from the county, which is our biggest responsibility, is repairing the vast number of roads in this county. And so I looked over the report, and there is more data now in the report than there has been in previous years. And what they've done now is they give us a list of the number of roads that were worked on. In the case of oil patching, it was 76 roads. Pothole repairs at 605 locations and dig out soft spots at 10 roads. And then they give us just a handful of examples of some of those roads. And as I drive around the county and see the state of our some of our roads are really continuing to deteriorate because we simply don't have the money to keep them all up. So we're doing a lot more of this kind of pothole repair as the report shows. So what I'm trying to understand is, how does the county prioritize those investments?
And because that strikes me as something that the community wants to know more about. And just anecdotally, I saw in the newspaper that Cavedale washed out up high, like 2 miles up the road or something. The roadway surface that was washed out looked in the photograph to be a lot better up there than it does in, my neighborhood, the Springs and Sonoma Valley. So the question is, are we applying, or is the county infrastructure department applying equity criteria or some criteria in determining which roadways to work on? And if they are, I'd like to see that reflected in the annual report. Now, obviously, we may not get that this draft because we'd be asking for new information. But like we did last time, to sort of begin to lay the groundwork for such a discussion. Or maybe it's already happening and I just would like to know what's going on.
So I believe the data that you're looking for is produced by Sonoma County PI and is put out by the Board of Supervisors, or is presented to the Board of Supervisors on an annual basis. They do a roads report that goes directly to the supervisors. And I think that that information is probably included in that report.
Great.
What we have, of course, the responsibility that we have is how they spent Measure M. And of course, we've discussed this before, but the county takes Measure M and puts it into a fund that goes into their maintenance program. And so I think that they have, as you mentioned, provided a lot more detail than they have in the past. And I think we're making great strides here. We, of course, are coming to the end of Measure M and are moving into Go Sonoma. And so there is certainly room for us to have further conversations with the county about how their tracking mechanisms and how they are spending their funding. But I think we also don't want to limit them too much because, as you've mentioned, the needs are great. And we want them to have the flexibility to spend the money where they feel that it is most appropriate. So I think that I can certainly take that question to the county and try to provide that information back to you. I'm not sure that it goes in this, but as long as they're including it in their roads report, I think that.
So that's where my ignorance after all these years still, if we could just have a link to the roads report, I would have clicked it instead of asking the question today. So thank you for that. Maybe we could add the link. Is that a reasonable thing?
I'm not sure it belongs in here, but I can certainly provide it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Jerry?
Yeah, a few things. One was looking at the buses and the performance on the buses. I've noticed that each one of the 3 county bus services, the metrics that they report were a little bit different.
That's
It wasn't consistent. And it'd be really nice. I mean, I look at the report also to find out how we're doing in transit in general. I mean, it's a good place to look. And I was looking for, some reported the number of riders, number of rides, the cost of the service. Last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, I was looking at what the cost was and what percentage of Measure M deferred the cost. It would really be nice that that was consistent from one to the other. And I know the numbers are all exist, just if we can report them. So they cover all those things. You can see what's happening.
So this is a report of how the funds were spent. It's a report to the public on how the funds were spent. I'll be honest, if we were to report what the cost per rider would be.
Yeah, I understand that part.
We'd never pass another sales tax measure.
Yeah, I understand that, but I was suggesting that part, but one's talked about the number of rides, another one talked about what percentage of the cost. For sure, that should be included in there, and the number of rider miles, and then if somebody wants to do the calculations, so find the numbers, which you're exactly right. Also, I saw Petaluma had growth, and I didn't know if that was a result of their now being free, or.
This will be, this is information on last year. And
okay, so that just started.
Their free fare program
Okay.
just started, so.
And then
that does not include.
And there was a link, a reference to a link on page 20 to look at more details about Petaluma, but I went to the link and I could not find the report that it refers to when I went to the link. So I may have had a problem with the page and understanding the page.
Oh, it's because it's a link to the comprehensive transportation plan.
Oh, and that's not there yet. Or is
Well,
it
it's
there?
under, I mean, there's an old one and then we're in the process of
I
developing a new
couldn't, I
one.
couldn't find it there when I
Ah.
went to the, went to the page. So it may be below something else.
Okay, I'll try to make sure that that link is clearer to the CTP.
Okay, and then on page 24, there's a reference in the one project to phase A, and there's nothing that points and says what phase A is.
On page 24, which I believe you are referring to the
I'll tell you in a
Wilfred
sec.
Avenue interchange.
Just a second. This, yeah, the Wilfred,
So you said there's a,
Wilfred and phase. Yeah, I look at the next
Are we
page and
talking
it
about
says phase A, but there's no phase A defined on the other page. So I don't know what it's
sorry,
referring
I'm
to.
not seeing it on page 24. I apologize.
Here. See that, talk to phase A, but I look at the previous page, which talks about what the
Oh,
phases are, and I
do.
can't find out what phase A is.
All right.
Um,
I actually, I think it's on the north project. So the problem is reference, let's see, I think, back here.
I figure you also give us this so we can find things that,
Nope, there it is.
Wanna
All right.
fix.
This way. Sorry. Oh. okay. Phase A. All right, I will make sure that
okay.
that gets.
and also I kept looking for some sort of narrative on Smart, and there's no narrative on Smart like there is on the buses. Did I miss it?
It immediately precedes the information sheet, so it's the second to last page,
Okay.
and it should be fairly brief.
And one of the reasons was Smart's becoming brilliant, and I keep getting on Smart in the standing room only.
Yeah.
And it'd be great if we keep highlighting that in every report that we have.
Yeah, they're doing great, aren't
They're
they?
doing
It's
fantastic.
Pretty snazzy. I love riding the train.
Um,
So yes, on page, I'm going to say 63, there is a
60
short narrative. Number
Oh, past all
4,
the
passenger
projects?
rail program. That's right. So each information sheet proceeds it follows the narrative. So for the LSR in the LSP, then you have the information sheets for the local streets program, and then you have the bike ped program, and then you have the bike ped info sheets and so forth. And so the rail program is the 4th program. It is the very last program reported out on. So there is on page 63, a single paragraph plus a table that discusses the rail program. And then the following page is the
Okay.
rail information sheet.
It'd be nice if there was some mention on that page about their performance change throughout the year. And there is a graph in the next presentation on that, but I'd love to see that.
So we try to limit what's in the Measure M annual report to
Just,
funds for
okay,
Measure M.
fine.
And if we got into reporting out on Smart and their
okay,
spectacular performance, it's not quite, and it's not even ours to claim, right? So we just try to keep it, just stick to the facts, ma'am.
and then there was one number that surprised me, and I'm not riding my bikes. I have 4 bikes and I don't ride any of them. But the one bike bridge over San Antonio Creek, and a project that's not funded, and I wasn't sure how it all ties together. $8 million to put a bike bridge across a creek.
So during the Marin Sonoma Narrows environmental compliance documentation phase of that project, the San Antonio Creek Bridge, we are talking about that, right? That is what we're talking about? Yeah, okay. Was identified as needing to be replaced. It is currently serving as, or it was serving before the Marin Sonoma Narrows project as a road bridge. But we decided, and because it's an older bridge, and I believe it is eligible, or if it's on the list of historic bridges. So widening it or replacing it wasn't really an option. So the consideration was to make it a
Bike bridge.
But it's also kind of, it's a mitigation requirement that didn't get done during all the other projects. So it's sort of, because there's right-of-way issues there. It's all very complicated and is, the counties of Marin and Sonoma are still talking about it. And so it is still in progress. It's still moving forward. It's just moving forward at a much slower pace than the rest of the project.
Okay, and
especially
$8
since-
is not the physical cost to construct a bicycle bridge across the creek?
Yeah,
So,
I
okay.
mean, it has a lot more to do with the right of way issue
Okay,
than,
fine.
and
Thanks.
all the other mitigation that has to happen.
Thanks, John.
Did you get what you needed from this committee?
I believe I did, unless there are more comments.
Rick's got a singer coming up right now, and then Tom's gonna follow.
I just wanted to make the modest suggestion that Shauna's remarks about sales taxes not be included in our minutes.
Oh.
I mean, these are public.
Tom?
So Highway 101, 6 million expended, and the bulk of that is financing. I'm on page 22 of our packet here. Can you say what percent done Highway 1 is based on expenditures? Are we at 90 odd percent?
I'm sorry, I'm still trying to find the page that you're on. You said, again,
It's table 4, I'm sorry.
tables on,
Table 4, Highway 101 program, project expenditures,
I'm getting there.
broken down by project.
Page
There we go.
22.
Yes, so that is for the year.
Yes.
That is only the expenditures that occurred this fiscal year. The majority of that is in paying off bond debt, et cetera. It's not,
So is it
Oh.
safe to say the next one of these reports is gonna be part M, part Go Sonoma, and that would be our last Highway 101 expenditures report, because by then it would be
I mean.
done. So
Um,
what I'm wondering, are you at for expenditures, if it's boiling down to just bonds, are you at 97, 98?
So Measure M will, I'll let David speak in a second. So Measure M will stop collecting funds in March of 2025. But our expenditures and our programs will continue forward.
Okay. I guess I'm asking, when does Highway 101 stop?
Well, we're certainly close, but we have the landscaping for all of the Highway 101 projects that have to occur now.
Yeah, just to add, so for the most recent project that's completed, Petaluma, the MSNC2 project, we will be doing mitigation monitoring reporting for the next 10 years for that project. So we'll be working on that for another 10 years. Some of that will be Measure M expenditures, some of them will be from Measure 3. So there will be some Measure M expenditures associated with that. And as Sean had mentioned, we will be doing some landscaping projects in Petaluma and between Santa Rosa, Arona Park, and Windsor over the next couple of years. So those expenditures will be continuing as well. So we have some closeout work still to do and some remaining last bits, but the widening project is essentially done. And just to add, our last bond payment should be even next month. So we should be wrapping up the large expenditures next fiscal year, or in your next annual report, you'll see next year.
Okay, will there be some final report on, this is what the total package cost? I mean, it's fine to break it down by project and phase, of course, but as that winds down, will there be a final reckoning of everything? Maybe save the mitigation stuff that trails off?
We are required to do an annual report to the Federal Highway Administration covering all of the projects, not only in Sonoma County, but in Marin County, and we can provide that report. But as Sean mentioned, that does include a couple unfunded projects such as San Antonio Creek Bridge.
Okay.
Jake?
Yeah, I'm just interested. 101 isn't going to go away. And so while the current project, the landscaping may be completed, there's one ongoing project in Santa Rosa at Turn Avenue, which involves 101. There's the recently evidently abandoned Railroad Avenue intersection, which I find to be of continuing interest, given that it's always been referenced in past decades as one of the mitigation measures for traffic problems in Pengrove. So I'm assuming when we when we phase out of the Measure M expenditures, then we'll be phasing in on the replacement measure. How do I say that?
Go Sonoma?
Goes,
Go Sonoma is, well, it's not project specific and it doesn't have the 101 program in it, of course. So, I mean, unless there was a specific project that went through the application and review process as part of Go Sonoma, because Go Sonoma is competitive rather than project specific.
so
we
Go
probably
Sonoma
need to-
money cannot be spent on 101?
I don't anticipate spending Go Sonoma money on 101. That's correct. Or
I guess something went by me there.
I think what I was asking about was the closing down of the widening project, not these other intersections. Just the going to 3 lanes. When is that expenditure stream going to taper down?
And it has tapered down considerably. We've spent millions already. I mean, more than 6 million, I can promise you.
Isn't it finished in Sonoma County though?
Yes, I mean, yes. Yes.
3 lanes
closing
all
out
the
some of
way.
those
I mean,
Yes, we're
those
still
of us
closing
who
out
are
some of the projects.
historians
The pro- I mean,
remember
the
that.
Technicality, right? That's how Caltrans works. There are still open contracts, but the widening, the physical widening of the freeway has been accomplished from border to northern Windsor.
Hasn't helped the traffic.
It has helped the traffic, as has SMART, but that's another argument.
No, I'm fine.
What about your overpass, McKenzie overpass? You want to go back to that?
Well, the Mackenzie overpass is improperly spelled,
I saw that, I noticed.
but I didn't arrive in Petaluma until 1972, and it evidently was constructed in 1971. So I wasn't in a position to correct their misspelling.
Not correctable by
That's,
you.
that's all.
Tom.
We got that out of the way. Thank goodness. The question I have is about the 101 objective of congestion relief. And I remember when the first couple of new lane opened up in the Santa Rosa area, there was no longer reports on the radio about congestion in Santa Rosa. But now I'm hearing them every day, and I actually sat through a little bit of congestion myself this afternoon, which is rare for me because I don't drive very much. So I was curious if there's any comprehensive assessment of the 101 corridor performance after all this money's been spent in terms of congestion relief. Will that be part of our annual report or a report to the state?
There has not been a comprehensive modeling exercise to look at the benefits of the corridor. I should note that Transportation Authority Marin, Sonoma County, MTC, and Caltrans are currently performing a traffic analysis to examine the HOV hours, and that study is looking at the existing congestion in the corridor and those hours of congestion. So we will have some data from that study that will be available soon. However, as I mentioned, we have not done a comprehensive kind of benefits look at the corridor. That would be a very involved exercise.
Well, thank you. I think it's we may get people wanting a fourth lane at some point. And I know that it's not fundable under the current regime, but who knows? Things could change in the world.
Going to your question and how the queues work and so forth. This goes back, James, to a conversation we had a while back as to who's in control of the signalization for getting onto 101 and so forth. Is it Caltrans still?
Yeah, they're unmetered.
Metering is owned and operated by Caltrans.
Do they review that periodically, and do they review it and change it for rush hour? Because it doesn't seem like they do in some instances.
Take feedback from this committee, and David can follow up with the specifics. They tend to be more reactive to community concerns other than just maintaining.
And on the Farmers Lane Highway 12 signalization, is that Caltrans or is that Santa Rosa? That's Caltrans as well? That seems to be one of the longest queues in Sonoma County now, Highway 12 backing up from Farmers Lane all the way to 101. Seems like that could be alleviated somewhat. Add another deck to Farmers Lane, maybe. That's the answer. Yeah,
Make more
Mark.
bike lanes and so there's less cars. on
Well,
the
there
road.
you
So back to Tom's comment about the utilization of the 3 lanes we have and potential expansion. The HOV sticker program is going to sunset in September of 25. What do we know at SCTA about the changed use of the HOV lane? What do we anticipate is gonna change with the flow of traffic? Because single driver occupants like myself in an EV, James, won't be able to use that lane any longer.
They do anyway.
So, I mean, I can tell you that from a policy standpoint, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission has never been supportive of the EV access in general, right, for many years now. And that the idea is to incentivize that carpool movement. With regard to the actual impacts to that lane, the study that David had reported out to you is focused on what is our new HOV hours going to be. And so they do occupancy surveys of all the lanes, including vehicle type for single occupancy EVs. So we've just recently collected that data and have the ability to analyze what the impacts would be. We will see the impacts first as to what our HOV hours are going to be recommended. We won't know what that report comes out with until early next year. And that is to align HOV hours between Marin and Sonoma. So the short answer to your question is, we've recently collected some data to answer it. We will likely have an answer in the spring. And before those impacts are even realized, there will be some impacts to Sonoma based on what the ultimate decision is in Marin to be able to align our hours. And we don't know what that is yet either. So this is a hot topic going into 2025. It will be discussed at our board in December on December 9th with regard to introducing the topic of aligning HOV hours. And I think your question is very timely.
Can we get a little bit, I know that this is a Pandora's box, we could
It
spend
is, because I
an
want.
entire meeting on this. But can we get a short version of that report, say January, February or something? Because I think there's a lot of interest here on.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we deferred some of the SCTA reportings that we were trying to reschedule. So February, yeah.
That'd be awesome.
The question I always had was this, I never understood, hey, I represent electric cars. I've been driving electric cars for 25 years. And I couldn't understand why they were letting me, while I was commuting, go in that lane. Because it's an HOV lane. And that's what it was designed to be. The question I have, and Los Angeles has it now, it's an HOV lane 24 hours a day. Because if you don't need it, then it could still be an HOV lane because you don't need it to get rid of congestion. Why look at the congestion, find out what time we need the HOV lane? It's needed during congestion so that somebody could go through while it's congested. Then the other times you don't need it. So leave it an HOV lane. Why not 24 hours a day?
Questions, more and more questions. We had a lot of questions.
I have 2 questions about the ramp metering, that we have. Is it real time or is it, like a timetable, fixed, plan? And the other question regarding, the HOV lanes, like, is there a consideration, like to have like what they call the managed lane or, high occupancy toll lanes, like to be implemented in our area, like, the Bay Area?
So the first question was on our carpool lanes. Are they adaptive or are they based on a timer? So they are based on a timer. So they do a study for what is needed and they basically program the interval of when the cars are let out based on the traffic study that they did. So they aren't a fixed timer, regardless of what traffic is actually doing. They're going to either pulse traffic usually between every 4 seconds at locations like Highway 12 to up to like 12 to 13 seconds at like the Baker Avenue southbound on-ramp. And you'll notice that, those of you that use those different on-ramps, as to how they work. With regard to the second question, there's currently not a discussion for a conversion to a price managed lane. There is potential for that to come out of the discussions about carpool lanes. I will tell you that the last time this went to our board, they were not supportive of essentially adding another tax or another user fee to our current network. They felt like the gas tax and the sales tax was enough. That was the direct feedback that we got at the time. Currently, there is, been a lot more work on this topic by MTC, seeing the value of what you can do for all lanes of traffic by allowing more users to use that managed lane. So potentially in the future, but currently there's not an effort moving forward.
Can I just add something? I've been 2 years now on the task force that's been working on that throughout the Bay Area. And the initial focus was only areas in the South Bay, but the focus has gotten wider now because of other discussions, including a bunch of different techniques, some which are tolling, some are which using satellites, some tracking your cell phones, and other ones are simply just charging everybody for all roadways for the number of miles that you drive. So you're actually paying for them, and the highways would be part of that in order to reduce the traffic. But the goal originally for all of that was to reduce traffic, and I volunteered because I was totally against the idea of tolling the highways in order to reduce traffic, because it didn't make any logical sense to me that you would toll the highways so that you'd have less traffic, because where's everybody going to go? And that discussion has extended more and more over the last 2 years. So if you want, MTC has been doing a lot of study on it. It's called the Next Generation Highway Study, but it's a lot more than Next Generation Highway at this point too.
My question, in fact, was specific to HOV lanes. Currently, if you are, double occupancy or triple occupancy, you drive for free. Otherwise, you pay. So there is no user fee for everyone. And regarding the ramp metering, the adaptive ramp metering, Caltrans, they implemented in other areas. Why they don't implement it in this area?
Can I suggest we get back to the agenda? I don't know
Yeah,
about
yeah,
anybody else, but I really need to get out of here at 5:30, and we've gotten, I mean, it's fascinating, but we've gotten way off of what was on our agenda.
Yeah. Good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Shauna.
Thank you.
No?
Not yet.
Hi, Brandon. How you doing?
Hello, I'm well, thank you.
Good.
Let's see. I'm just gonna share my screen, Drew. It's easier. All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So here are the Measure M and Go Sonoma financials for the month ending October 31st. I did make a slight edit to this slide from what you received in your packet. The Go Sonoma balance sheets are not included yet. We are still finalizing the format on those when the packet deadline happened. And the Go Sonoma and Measure M sales tax forecast items were included. So though this is reflecting the actual materials you received. The revenues for October 2024 were $3,014,020, bringing our year-to-date revenues to $5,542,275. And expenses for the month were $3,970,314. So when last month we had those unusually low expenses, they caught up.
Yeah.
And we are sitting with the cash balance of $72,800,927. The revenues were predominantly sales and use taxes, a little over 2.3 million, and then $672,000 in interest on our pooled cash. And this around so I can see. So the taxes that we received in October were down 14% from what we received in 2023 in October. And our year-to-date earned taxes are $4,869,000, which are down 9%. The year-to-date received of $10,410,000, those include all of the payments we've actually received from July. So they include some of the dollars that were for last year, for 23-24. We did reach out to HDL, our sales tax consultants, about this, and we have a meeting set up for January, February time to see. Hopefully we'll have more data then to know why the dip. But as of right now, we don't know. Our October expenses, the large portion was the contributions to other governments, $3,891,000, and those were primarily the local street repair and transit payments to the cities and the county. There's $37,776 in staff time and $18,972 in consulting services. And then we have a new slide here, which we will expand when we have more action, but this is for the Go Sonoma financials. And so the revenues for Go Sonoma were $2,457, which was entirely interest. And then the expenses were $15,606.22. Bringing the year-to-date expenses for Go Sonoma to $77,982, which is almost entirely staff time. And Go Sonoma is sitting on a cash balance of $1,204,475. All right, that's the end of my presentation. If there's any questions.
Way to speed it up. Good job. Thank you.
So you're not collecting Go Sonoma money yet, but you're already spending it?
That's correct. Yeah, there's a loan from Measure M to begin implementing programs.
Thanks for asking that. I was wondering.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
John, since that went by so fast, could I make one more comment about our previous discussion? What Tom was suggesting about studying how much congestion relief we actually got from expanding from 2 lanes to 3. I think it's important to know that. I think we should find out because the rule seems to be, well, 10 years ago, the way to solve congestion problems was to pour more concrete. And I think those of us who have been following things realize that that's probably not going to work. You just make congestion worse. It may take a couple of years, but it happens. I'm not sure the public knows this yet. So I think it would be useful to have some kind of a study of what we actually got by expanding 101 from 2 lanes to 3.
It's a growing body of evidence that expanding highways doesn't solve congestion in the long term. Because it's more demand to drive on those roads.
Well, that's why I think we ought to do this till we have more evidence.
But remember, the incoming head of the Department of Transportation is a reality TV star. So we might not necessarily.
All right, let's just, I mean, this is,
Thank you.
you guys are seemingly wanting to take this committee and our mission statement far in excess of what I think it is. We're not doing social engineering or transportation engineering with this committee. So I would just like to remind everybody, let's just keep it where it belongs. We're supposed to be monitoring how the money is spent, not changing the definition of what the public wanted 10 years ago, with all due respect.
But
it's not our job.
The folks voted for congestion relief is why I bring it up.
The folks voted for a sales tax measure, and they defined what the sales tax measure was spent on. Go ahead, Adam.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm here to give a progress report on how our transportation system has been performing over the last several years. This is an update as part of the comprehensive transportation plan. So essentially giving us a snapshot, a little cast back to see how we're doing. This is going to be a really brief, hopefully, highlight of where we've been. So just as a reminder, the visions and goals around the CTP are around being connected and reliable, having our transportation system be safe and well-maintained, be community-oriented and place-based, and have zero emissions. So looking at our travel patterns, we can see that primarily most of the trips that start within Sonoma County stay within Sonoma County, almost 90%. However, that when we do leave, our primary commuting patterns are to Marin, to Napa, and to Solano as our top destinations. To make a note quickly about how the 101 has been doing, based off some national data, we do know that since 2019 to 2023, there has been about a 9% decrease in hours of delay. The map on the left shows in the darker orange where those concentrations across the county of delay have been. And we can also take a look at the average trip length, see how efficient our movements are. So in total, we can see in the light green, that's for trips that go outside of your city, outside of your county, just the total average. However, when we take a snapshot of just looking at trips within the city, that's where we see where Bjorn mentioned earlier, Petaluma is 2.9 miles per trip when you're just trying to stay within, offering a great opportunity for more active modes of transportation.
Can you go back to
Sure.
the US 101 of delay decreased by 9%,
That's correct.
Yeah. Is this a reflection, to answer part of the question that, was risen, like a few minutes ago, how we spend the money? And does it improve, like congestion?
Yeah, it
I
could be.
think this is, gives an indication.
Though, too.
Yeah, this
COVID.
is including COVID, and I don't think the construction was finished by 2019 either. But it's something that with the data that we got from this source, we could potentially look at when the US 101 was finalized in Sonoma County for widening and be able to take that snapshot. So it's something we can definitely follow up on. Looking at pavement condition index, we see overall countywide, we're doing good with the slow general increase since 2019, and across the individual jurisdictions, it's somewhat of a mixed bag. Some staying steady, some on the rise, and just a few with some gentle slopes down as well. So the 2023 is what's labeled there for the latest PCI for the 3-year average.
What is PCI?
Pavement condition index. So what good condition the roads are in? Are there lots of potholes, so forth?
70 is acceptable, is that right?
Yeah, there's a different range. I think 70, up in the 70 is kind of the higher level. We can follow up on kind of the exact classes. Those are reported by MTC.
And this is an annual report that comes out of MTC, as I recollect.
Correct, yeah. And it has a running 3-year average for this particular report, so you can see kind of the overall general trend. Focusing on pedestrian and bicyclists, we've got some great news that since 2019, we've had about an increase in 473 miles of bicycle facilities. So that accounts for the whole range of facilities. However, though, we see that where those concentrations of accidents have occurred over that time, we see primarily in our downtown areas, but also in more unincorporated communities of Guerneville and the Sonoma Valley as well. Also good news is that when we look at the per capita crashes of bicyclists and pedestrians, so that's the number of crashes per 10,000 people, there has been a noticeable decline that I think we can say even after COVID, there still has that strong downward trend. So that hopefully is directly correlated to the line just above of increasing the protected facilities, then ideally decreases the number of crashes.
That bucks a national trend, doesn't it?
Yeah, it probably, yeah, it does. You're right. I did read that.
We might want to emphasize that. It's a pretty significant finding if we're doing much better than our benchmark.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Good point.
So Adam, you mentioned a comment regarding COVID, so how do you manage, the COVID period, in your analysis here, to remove, the irregularities of the COVID in the, data you are presenting here?
We didn't alter the data at all, so it's just the straight facts. So whatever impacts there were from COVID are then reflected in this information. So the data wasn't altered in any way to account for COVID.
So this applies, to all, data you are presenting today?
Correct. Yeah. And so we'll see some examples of that. Also in this next slide, we've got a few different charts. In the upper left, we see the cost per mile. So that is actually having increased no matter what your range is annually, 10,000, 15 or 20,000 miles. But in terms of COVID, what I wanted to mention was that for metric tons of CO2 emitted and our vehicle miles traveled, that we do see from 2018 down to 2022, from 2018 to 2020, that obviously was during the time of COVID, that there was probably some artificial drop just because everybody's lives changed so drastically. But in 2022, we see somewhat more of that normalization. This is more business as usual, if you will. So there still is that decline, but from 2020 to 2022, there has been that slight increase, just people recovering their lives after COVID. As mentioned also by Bjorn's presentation, that emissions from transportation, as we all know, are the main primary source. What is great to celebrate though is that there's that tiny blue line at the very top of the bar chart. That's our water conveyance and water processing related emissions. Those are extremely low compared to other counties, and that's largely in part just by the work of Sonoma Water and Sonoma Clean Power many years ago. This is our last chart. This is a great one because it combines both the passengers and revenue hours. So it's essentially a term of efficiency. How many people are our trains and buses moving on an annual basis? This is called a ribbon chart also. So the largest values are at the very top. So in FY18, Santa Rosa City Bus was moving the most people per hour of bus time. Though what we can see is that over the course of the years, SMART has actually taken that lead role in terms of the efficiency of how many hours are people riding these transit vehicles. So with that, I'll finish my presentation, and I know we're close to time, so I'll leave it up to you, Chair, if we want to have discussion, or I know there's sharing time as well. So
I know for those that have limited time, if you get a question or comment, I'd say jump in now. And then for those of us that have an extra 10 minutes, there's probably enough in that report where we could fill 10 minutes pretty easily. That was really good. Thank you.
Yes.
Any comments right off the get?
I especially like the heat map. Yeah, it tells a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a way, I don't know, do you do the modeling here or somebody else?
Yeah, Chris and I do the modeling.
Is there a way, to give the group here or the committee, because there was a lot of discussion about the measure impact on relieving congestion. I think, it is, the modeling can, give, the congestion, without the widening, this year in comparison, with, the widening to 3 lanes in each way, and to see the impact, what impact we did on relieving congestion on Highway 101, you know. The comparison could not be, you know, we see congestion now. The question, if we did not do the project, you know, what's the congestion?
Counterfactual, yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely something we can look into.
Yeah.
It's great.
I have a question. So, how do you plan on reducing the amount of crashes on the 12 and Fulton intersection?
See, I'm not sure if I caught that question. Could you repeat it, please?
How do you propose to reduce the amount of accidents at the Highway 12 and Fulton intersection?
Highway 12 in Fulton.
Yes,
Someone.
I can.
that it is really a bad intersection.
I can forward the site with all the recent plans. I don't think you might.
I can't hear.
Yeah, we can forward some information on,
Send something to you directly.
some information directly onto you about the pedestrian bicycle improvements for that intersection.
And the Vision Zero dashboard too.
And the Vision Zero dashboard as well. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, we have Fulton specific. All right, thank you, Adam.
Thank you for your time.
Any announcements?
I do.
Yes.
Yeah, imagine. As you all know, I sit on the Policy Advisory Council for the MTC. And this last meeting, with 5 days of time to prep, they sent us 380 pages of material to review. Part of that had to do with the result of funding and the proposals coming back for what's called the financial cliff. But in reality, it was either 10 or 30-year plans on how to actually fund our transportation network. The Policy Advisory Council sent a recommendation that there were 2 proposals sent back that staff was looking at seriously. One called 1A, which is a 10-year proposal to fund just Alameda, San Francisco, and San Mateo. And the other one's called a hybrid approach, which allows us, Sonoma County, and the other counties to also opt in on the funding plan. That's the one that the Policy Advisory Council advised that the staff focus on, and that would be a 30-year funding measure. There's a lot of details in that, and that's why there's 380 pages. I just wanted to mention that and what the recommendation was so far. That also brought a whole bunch of material for me to read, which included a lot of comments from our citizens. From our county. And a lot of it had to do with, hey, I'm paying for these things and why don't I have SMART coming to Cloverdale and Healdsburg? We know it's going to Healdsburg, and Windsor will be open soon. I did send to staff a question that I'd love to have us discuss or be discussed. Why not start providing those services so those people can see it without a train? Just have an express bus that runs from terminal to terminal and ties together. SMART has really become tremendously successful. I don't know how they're going to get more and more trains on the line, as has Golden Gate, sorry, not the buses, the ferries. 400 people on a ferry in the middle of the day. So we're finding that the traffic on our highways is pushing everybody to go take the other means. And I think we should find ways to support those. In any case, I was looking, the reason I mentioned this was our group, when 1031 showed up last year, said, hey, we don't like this idea. And then finally enough gimmies were given that said, okay, maybe, but I'd like it if we could find ways to do things here where we could turn around and say, yeah, we want to be in. We want to have permanent funding that recognizes our transportation system and improves it over time, not necessarily building all the highways. And one of the recommendations was don't spend all the money building highways. It was find other ways to get people from point A to point B. Anyway, I thought I'd report back on that and see if we can find ways to track what's going on with that. It will show up very quickly in the next few months because proposals will go out and it will be sent to our county probably early next year saying, do you want to opt in? If you want to opt in, you have to opt in before the vote occurs. And so we should be ready for, what do we want out of that?
Great question. Thank you.
I just had a member of the public reach out to Steve Burlbaugh and myself asking the question, because they were looking over the Santa Rosa general plan, what the word resiliency or resilient means in the context of a transportation project. And so I said, I don't know, I'll look it up. And I looked up a number of the SCTA and City of Santa Rosa projects, and I saw the term used very broadly. Everything from pavement repair to, you can imagine. So I sent that off to staff at SCTA, and that seems to have been well received. We're going to be probably thinking about that a little bit more. But in the context of, this week where we saw some record-shattering rain that had a big impact on our county's infrastructure, I have historically been sort of resistant to taking money away from mitigation and putting it in adaptation, greenhouse gas mitigation. But the reality is we are making such poor progress toward greenhouse gas mitigation that the water is literally flooding in. So we are going to have to change the way we do things. And so I'm trying to rethink all of my old habits in the context of this new normal that we find ourselves in. And so just an announcement.
I've only lived here 8 years this time, and in Sebastopol, the 100-year floodplain has now flooded 3 times.
You didn't look that old.
All right, with that, thank you guys. Adjourn.
Man, if the smart sales tax isn't renewed, there won't be any smart.
Tom, I want to go back and look. When we, about what the reason is, the only reason I got was.
No, I
Part of it was
understand that, but I am not an optimist.
There was part of it was
on this
safety. Part of
particular
it was
issue. Anyway,
cutting down the time for emergency vehicles. There was more than just
True.
congestion relief. And I think we were all pretty aware it wasn't going to relieve congestion at all. This committee, 10 or 12 years ago, where we sat in here and somebody